I'm going to talk about a few things today. I'm going to step through this idea of the paradoxes that exist within product. I'm going to talk about vision and this concept of build a market fit. I'm going to focus on execution and something called the Steve paradox. I'll touch on community. I'll make an outrageous claim about this idea that there's no such thing as building real community. I'm also going to talk about culture and how to build product teams that have user-focused cultures. And then I'm going to talk about team topologies, very importantly, creating user empathy within engineering teams. And then lastly, building sales teams that have user-focused cultures. Next slide, please. So a quick intro who I am. My name is Johann Bornman. I'm the group product lead for MetaMask Institutional. Next slide. Actually, let me. So my background is in investment management. I helped to start and build an investment business about 15 years ago. Realized that software is eating the world and it's going to change the world we live in. And so I left to learn how to do full stack development, married these two disciplines to combine technology and finance, and then worked at a robo-advisor as director of product, helped build the company's investment engine and helped it scale across Europe. And after doing 3 years of that, I built my own fintech business. And after 3 years of that, I then joined Consensus to help start, build, and lead MetaMask Institutional. And within MetaMask Institutional, we have this really grand vision to bridge every single organization on planet Earth into Web3. Thank you, sir. So we do so by providing unrivaled access with the most trusted wallet in the space, MetaMask. And very importantly, we provide unrivaled key management to help and empower institutions with both custodial as well as self-custodial solutions. So just giving you an idea of the growth of MMI over the last year, despite crypto markets falling 60 to 80%, our TVL and our revenue grew about 10% week on week, every single week throughout the year. Very importantly, we pay very close attention in terms of product market fit. And our engagement was about 0.6%. This is daily over weekly and weekly over monthly transacting active users. There's a lot of content written about this from Sequoia. And then lastly, our retention was greater than 60%, our 8-week retention. And a core fundamental principle we have within the team is how can we build products and experiences that users cannot live without? Okay. So jumping into the presentation and sort of this idea of the paradoxes that exist within products. Okay, so I realized when I put this talk together, I could have just very easily put on some UX from a DApp and spend 20 minutes talking about the design rehab that needs to happen. And I could also talk about the gurus in products. I talk about Marty Kagan and Steve Krug. And I can talk about the religions that exist within product. You know, we all worship, or most of us, or many of us worship at the feet of Eric Ries and design thinking and Google venture sprints. And I think one thing I sort of want to press upon folks within this presentation is this idea within product there are no real blueprints. There are no silver bullets. And sort of the explanation that I would use, the mental model, is one of my favorite books called Siddhartha. And one of its core messages is this idea that if you follow the teachings of the Buddha, you do not become the Buddha, you become a follower of the Buddha. And so within product, it's very important that you can gather a lot of wisdom from these books. There's a lot of insight, but there is no golden enlightenment towards products. You have to do the hard work. And I think a really important sort of concept that I'm going to leave you with, and this is something we pay very close attention to, is this idea that user-focused is a philosophy, it's a principle, it's a culture. It's not just design systems or design thinking. Okay, so build a market fit. Now, if you look at sort of where products come from and where they find success, there are very different ways to segment the markets and look at kind of why products become unicorns. And this is a very simple study. It sort of segmented a range of unicorns across different categories. And what you find is that it's almost completely random. But if you look at the top category, solve your own problems, roughly 30% of unicorns on this slide came from this category. Now, I'm not going to make the argument that finding unicorns is best fit by solving your own problems. But the point of I want to make with this slide is this idea that if we want to build more user-focused products, if we want to build better experiences, it is insanely important to solve problems for users that we care about. And we can do so when we have empathy for those users. And I would argue that having empathy and understanding the users come from solving your own problems first. Now, this is a great book by Clayton Christensen. It talks about how you'll measure life. And the point I'm trying to make here is that it's really important, the problems that you take on, the challenges that you spend your time solving. And I think that within Web3, we have this very optimistic view of the future. We're all here to build a better world. And therefore, we're all very much mission-driven. But I would argue fundamentally what we want to achieve is to build products that impact people's lives for the better. And again, I would say that this can be done best by solving problems for users that you deeply understand, that you deeply have empathy for and with. And I would argue that that is best done for users that you know best, i.e. yourself. And you tend to find, or I tend to find, that a lot of these experiences connect. Your past experiences are unique, the problems that you solve are unique, and looking backwards, it is often strange how the dots can connect to help build better user experiences. For myself, I, again, started an investment business. It was very much focused on building an experience, building a product to give individuals access to traditional assets. And then with the robo-advisor, it was doing the exact same thing, but just using technology to democratize access. And then my own startup, we were very focused on product experience, user experience, helping users make better decisions. And what I found is that this pattern is repeated within MetaMask Institutional, where what we are focusing on is providing unrivaled access. How can we give institutions control to monitor, manage, and report on their assets? So again, a repeating pattern from my past career. And I would say every single person in this room has that repeating pattern. And therefore, look to solve problems where these patterns repeat, because you will build fundamentally better user experiences. Okay, so execution, the Steve paradox. Now, there are these sort of two polar ends of product visions. You have Steve Jobs, the visionary, who sort of fundamentally believes in, user research can't get you to fundamental truth. He believed that no single user research would have produced the iPhone. And then the other extreme, you have obviously Steve Blank, which is all about getting out of the room and doing the hard work. And I see often products fail because entrepreneurs and product builders can't hold both these two paradigms within their head. And it's really important to strike that balance between these two sides. You have to be both Steve Jobs. You also have to be Steve Blank. And that's fundamentally important in sort of, again, building really insightful product experiences. But I would say that there are no silver bullets in product. You have to do the hard work. And the product teams that I see that execute, that build the best experiences, get out of the building every single day, spend time with the users, hypothesis test, and find golden truth. And it's all about, obviously, rapid iteration. Now, within the MI team, we believe that product discovery is the lifeblood of building great products. We fundamentally believe in the 0 to 1 product process. And what we have is this concept of tier 1 user needs. So we focus very closely on a user need that the user has identified, they consider to be within their top 3, and they're actively looking for a solution. And we spend a lot of time with our users. It's sort of one of our product principles. We make sure that we speak to a user at least every single day. And a lot of the way I spend my time is to either start or end my day with speaking with our users, because we want to understand what their needs are, how they're using our product, and how can we build a better experience for them. We also have very strictly defined design and product principles and structure our team specifically to understand how our users are spending their time and to solve for their most important needs. And I'll touch on all these aspects in a second of why I think it's really important. Fundamentally, though, what we are always aiming to do is solve for and build painkillers over vitamins. Vitamins are fantastic. They build delightful product experiences. They delight the user. But what you are trying to solve for are painkillers. These are the things that users cannot live without. Now, a big part of product building, I would say, is community building. And I'm going to make this outrageous claim that there's no such real thing as community building. And it's slightly a facetious comment. The point I'm trying to make is that ultimately, if you're building for a user that you have deep empathy for and understand, this most likely is you or someone like you, you're not building a community, you are the community. And I would make this argument that one of the most powerful things within Web3, the fact that we have these amazing communities, is that the builders in this space, everyone in this room, we are all building for people that look and sound like us, that have our problems. And so again, I think it's insanely important when you're thinking about building product to focus on community building. This is an absolute hack and a cheat. I would highly recommend it for everyone in this room. It's something that I focus a lot on. It's a lot of things I advise companies or product leaders when they're hiring product managers. Focus on finding product leaders that can build community. It is an insanely underrated and valuable skill set to have. And there are guides. This is a fantastic book by David Hyatt on building brands with purpose. Kevin Kelly's wrote in the 1,000 True Fan blog post, a fantastic piece I would highly recommend reading. And an old classic is Dale Carney's book of How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of my best friends is the head of UX and design at MoonPay, and he recommends it for all their product leaders, for every single PM within that company to read this book, because it's insanely valuable to connect with users, again, to build community. Okay, I've been given the warning. Creating user-focused teams. So how do you create a culture of product thinking, of great user experience? So this is a fantastic talk by Ben Horowitz, would highly recommend it. It talks about the gentleman on the right, Toussaint Louverture. He was a Haitian slave that created a revolution, and he installed a fantastic culture within his army, and it's well worth listening to. What I would say is that it is insanely important that if you're going to be thinking about building better product experiences, that you have product and design principles. This is really important. You have to define what matters, what you want to do, how you want to do it, and how you and your team approach product and design on a daily basis. Also importantly, you have to ensure that you structure your team for good design, good product, good user experience. Now, there are loads of books around this. There are loads of guides of how to structure product teams. One that I would highly recommend is this book by Matthew Skelton, and it focuses on the idea that you will ship your org chart. So it's very important that you structure your teams in a way, again, that you can focus on user experience and product thinking. And you do so, I believe, by creating product experience teams. These experience teams are empowered to take on user problems, and their entire focus is to iterate rapidly. And they normally start with a technical lead or product lead, maybe some engineers, perhaps a design resource, and these experience teams are normally supported by a platform team. So these are, once APIs are scaled, they are spun out into the platform team. Very important, I believe, it's also a need to have design leadership and product leadership sitting across these experience teams, because you want to make sure that you have one holistic view that all these teams are sprinting towards. There are design principles that everyone's following. Okay, so how do you create empathy in engineers? So I think one of the superpowers within Web3 is that we are an engineering culture-driven ecosystem. Some of the greatest tech companies in the world all have engineering powers, they have engineering cultures, and I think one of the most amazing things in Web3 is that we have such strong engineering principles. All the great companies in the space are fantastic engineering organizations. Now, engineers are rock stars, and within MMI, we have this concept of sort of an internal joke. I call all the engineers in my team goats. It's a privilege to work with them every single day. And I view my role as a product leader to be in service of my engineering team. I want to empower them. I want to make sure that the voice of the customer, the voice of the user is curated for them in a simple, in a seamless and accessible way. So every single user research piece that we do, we summarize and collate on Friday so that the engineers can easily access these summaries. All calls are recorded through a sales product called Gong. I listen to every single call that our sales team has. I curate all that as well, give to the engineers. They have access to our user research, and we also pull them into user research calls on Zoom as well, because we want to make sure that they hear from the voice of the user. The best ideas within your organization will come from your engineers. And so you have to empower them with the voice of the user on a daily and weekly basis. And I promise you, this is an absolute hack. Once engineers understand how users are using the product, where they're falling short, it will drive a whole host of innovation within your team. Okay, so how do you build sales teams that are user-focused? So we have sort of a bit of a mandate within the MetaMask institutional team. We make sure that all our sales colleagues either read the MOM test or 4 steps to the epiphany. We want to make sure that they have this deep empathy and sympathy when it comes to doing user research. We also make sure we capture the voice of the user constantly. So we write call reports for every single meeting. We record all our sales calls as well. I consume all this content on a weekly basis. We want to make sure that we are capturing the raw voice of the user in every single interaction. Also, very importantly, we spend time mapping the customer. So we step through who the end user is, the influencer, the recommender, the economic buyer, the decision maker, and the saboteur. Every single user we interact with, we map across this vector. Okay, so a bit of a disjointed presentation, so I do apologize for that. What I talked about is this idea of paradoxes within product. You have to think about being and finding builder market fit, solving problems for users that you deeply understand. You have to focus on building community. And again, you are not building community if you are the community. That is a hack, I think, in terms of building product. Focus on creating user-focused cultures, structure your teams accordingly, create empathy within your engineers, and very importantly, structure your tail teams to build user empathy. And I think the kind of core message I want to leave you with is this idea that being user-focused is not just about design thinking, it is about a culture, a philosophy, a principle. Thank you all.
Can I ask questions?
Yes, sir.
Really quick, please. So I feel like being like user-focused, you have good processes, it's really easy when you have a certain scale. But actually, strangely enough, with a small team, sometimes it's hard, right? The devs want to run and develop something, and the UX designer, you can wait, only gets like a few days to make like the next feature ready and so on. Do you have any kind of tips for like small teams, how to like be effective but still do like proper user research and like user-centric design?
Yeah, interesting. I always find it's, thank you, it's very kind. I always find it's much easier with smaller teams because you're all sort of rowing in the same direction. If you have engineers that are incredibly productive and there's kind of sprinting ahead, that could also be a superpower. I think the thing that I would say there is like, how can you kind of bring that empathy from the user to your engineers? Because that, again, creates that fast iteration, but then also aligns with what your UX designer wants. And so try bring them into that process as much as possible. One thing we do a lot is we have new feature meetings. And so we start very early, we start thinking about features, and we bring engineers very early into that process so they understand which way the product is going. They're involved very early in user research as well. And so they kind of understand the direction of the product roadmap. And so when they're sprinting ahead and building, they know it's kind of within the vision that you have for the product. Exactly.
Thank you.
So now it's lunchtime, if you guys want to stay and
I think everyone wants lunch, yeah. Thank you very much, all.